Chapter 16. I've got a ticket to ride. That was close. That was very close. I almost didn't see them in time, but thankfully they weren't the quietest bunch. The tracks Onion and I were traveling on started to descend in elevation over the past few hundred feet. In doing so, they were taking us much closer to street level, where we almost were spotted by a trio of bears that seemed to be fighting each other. The sides of the track were short enough that if they had been paying more attention, they surely would have spotted us. I ducked behind the husk of a car, trying to stay out of sight. Since I hadn't heard any indications otherwise, it must have worked. I checked my pip bore and saw 3 dots, but they were constantly blinking on and off. I hit my pip bore a few times, but to no avail. It was like the machine was having trouble picking them up. "Onion, I think my pip bore's acting up. Why didn't you alert me?" "I'm sorry, miss, but I can't seem to get a clear reading on them." I wonder why. So far, neither of our sensors had prevented us from tracking lifeforms nearby, except for that damn North. Were these guys using the same tactic to keep off the sensor sweeps? But then again, he didn't appear at all. These guys seemed to be appearing and disappearing, but they were always in visual range. I wonder if something's interfering with our sensors. Maybe some building material or radiation or some type of technology we don't know about. "I'm not sure, miss, but I would advise against investigating. Those 3 look quite strong." I took a peek to watch them more carefully. Each of them were wearing some kind of rusty-looking metal armor. They seemed to take turns. 2 of them fought while the other watched. I grabbed the scope from my bag and took a closer look. They appeared to be in a red ring that was crudely drawn on the ground. Every time one of them pushed the other out of the ring, the one watching stepped in and they went in again. While they were not talking, I could hear audible grunts and growls and roaring coming from them. It only took me a few minutes to notice that there was something off about them. They moved very stiff, as if they were actually robots. But that was shaken away when I saw one of the fighters dig his claws into his opponent, and blood started leaking from the open wound. But the injured bear just looked at it and seemed to shake it off before continuing the fight. Despite his injuries, he managed to win, and the next one was tagged in. During this entire event, I didn't notice any of them take a break, to eat or drink or do anything, or attend to their wounds. Every time the loser would swap out, and he simply stood there, arms to his sides, and just watched. I could see his eyes darting back and forth, but no other movement. These guys were starting to make me nervous. I felt my fur stand on edge as a chill went down my spine. Let's get out of here. Something is wrong with these guys. I can't seem to figure out why, but I'd rather not find out the hard way. "Best suggestion you've made so far, miss." Onion really didn't like fighting. Unfortunately, it seemed that the non-peaceful life was unavoidable out here. Every time we think it's safe, a new enemy presents itself. Whoever first said the calm before the storm must have been a die-hard adventurer, because it always seems to be way too calm before all hell breaks loose. We snuck away as quietly as possible before we were far enough away not to attract the attention of those bears. If it was something smaller, like maybe a rat, I would have probably investigated some more. Whatever drugs these guys were on would not have made a pretty battle, even with bats. I know I've probably faced much worse so far, but I felt way too uneasy about these guys to try anything. "Now that we are far away from those bears, miss, I should point out something." "What's that?" "It's starting to get late. By my calculations, within the next 45 minutes, it will be too dark to continue on our travels safely." Oh, you're right. We've been traveling for a while, with a few breaks. We should find a place to rest. We'll leave at daybreak tomorrow. We should make it to Hope by early afternoon. Based upon the maps of the rail line, miss, we are approaching Little Rodentia Station A. Station A? How many stations does it have? 2, miss. Station A is located on the outskirts of Little Rodentia. while Station B is located within it. My files show that pre-war Little Rodentia was built within a large park and walled off from the outside to prevent larger mammals from accidentally hurting both the civilians and the property. Based upon that, I would assume that Station A was designed for larger mammals, while Station B was for the smaller ones.
Well, that makes sense. I'm glad I brought my floating encyclopedia with me.
Someone needs to know this stuff, miss. As I recall, history was of little interest to you unless it pertained to something technological.
Who needs history lessons? Not like I can go back and change it. What's done is done.
The philosopher George Santandler once said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." It would be wise to remember that, miss.
How can I repeat something I never knew? You know what? Never mind. I don't feel like arguing with an encyclopedia. I checked my Pipmore map and saw that we were pretty close to Station A. It should take us only about 15 minutes or so to get there. Hopefully it's safe enough to spend the night. Sure, today wasn't as physically exhausting, especially after being in a week-long coma, but I was already getting mentally tired again. I don't know if it was this sudden relocation, the nightmares I had been having, or just needing something to drink, but I could feel a sense of unease. Hopefully by morning I'll feel right as rain. Who knows? Maybe once we get to Hope, we can make ourselves at home there. That is, after we find those redneck bastards and make them pay for what they did to Beaverton. I haven't forgotten. It's amazing how quickly the day can fade when your mind is preoccupied with something. One moment the sun was shining, as much as it could through the thick cloud cover, and the next moment it was too dark for my eyes to fully adjust anymore, that I ended up tripping over a loose rail spike. And of course I landed, where I always do, on my face.
Are you all right, miss?
I was really starting to get annoyed every time Onion asked me if I was all right. Maybe I have to revisit his programming soon. I'm fine.
Are you sure, miss? You sound a bit disgruntled.
I'm just getting tired, is all. We've been walking for such a long time with too few surprises. I think my mind and body is just getting too well adjusted to this world. I didn't want to take any of my current annoyance out on him. He was just following his programming. And I was getting tired. You'd think that a week-long coma would have stored some of that unspent energy. Guess not. I took a look at the map. Station A was very close. I just wanted to sit down, eat, pass out. Although part of me really hoped that there was something there to get my adrenaline going. Bad, Olivia. Bad. I need to take my mind off these self-destructive thoughts. There was still just enough light for me to make out my surroundings, so I moved towards the edge of the railway and took a look around. I immediately noticed a sudden lack of buildings. I had been so deep in thought on what I wanted to accomplish when I got to Hope that I didn't notice the large multi-species buildings had dropped off, leaving a flat, barren area. I saw rocks and small things jutting up from the ground that I didn't recognize. Didn't Onion mention that Little Rodentia was built within a park? If this is one, there's a severe lack of any greenery. Then again, 200 years without a groundskeeper probably didn't help. I looked back from where we had came to see the light of the setting sun peering over the horizon, highlighting the buildings behind us. All this time out here and I didn't think to recall to watch the sunset. It was rather eerie. The light was almost blood red. It was bathing the clouds closest to the horizon in a crimson hue, casting the same light to the nearest buildings. It almost made everything look like it was on fire. Images of Beaverton started to flood my head. Fire, ash, bodies burning alive. I remembered the pig, blind and injured, seeking not for his own safety but for that of the children. The same children that he had unknowingly sent to their doom by sealing them beneath the schoolhouse. And then I remembered my nightmare. It was so real, so vivid. It was almost like I was there. I felt my eyes burning. I don't want to remember. I need to look forward. I don't know if I tripped over something or if my leg gave out, but I simply dropped to my knees and I could feel the tears forming in my eyes. My thoughts drifted between anger, sorrow, and pain. Was this happening now? I had been feeling happy. Happy that I was alive. Happy that I was getting close to my destination. And happy to have finally met some kind souls in this miserable world. I slammed my paw down onto the ground with anger, cutting it on some unseen object. I held up my paw and saw the blood starting to run. It was too much for me. I began to cry.
Miss? Are you?
No! I'm not okay! Do I look okay to you? I let out all my anger and all my pain in those words.
I'm sorry, miss. It's just that...
I need a minute. Just go on ahead and make sure that the area is clear. Please. My paws were on my head, as if I was trying to shove everything back in between wiping the tears. I can't be falling apart like this. Not here out in the open. For all I knew, my yelling attracted something or someone. That actually made me chuckle between sobs. I wish somebody was here that I could take out my emotions on. I wouldn't even use my gun. I'd just activate bats and wail on them with my feet and paws until they were a bloody stain on the ground. Then maybe I could get this out of my system. A voice broke through my savage thoughts, originating from my direct communications channel.
Miss, I've located Station A, and so far my sensors are clear of activity. May I return to you?
Just wait there, Onion. I'll be along shortly. I pulled my paw back from the comlink button for a moment before pushing it again. I'm sorry for snapping at you, Onion. Don't worry. I'll be fine. I wiped away the rest of my tears, although unfortunately I used my bloody paw, so I'm pretty sure there's now some blood war paint on my face. I smiled to myself, thinking how badass I must look now, provided that no one saw my emotional breakdown. I really hope this isn't becoming a thing with me. I already have too many things as it is. I got up and started towards Onion. Thankfully, this track only goes in two directions, forwards and backwards, and I've come too far to go back. Part of me was relieved, but the other part was disappointed that Station A was completely unoccupied. Unlike the Grass Street station, this place must have seen better days. It looked as if it had been divided into two sections like Grass Street, one for the smaller mammals like myself and another for larger ones. However, this place lacked anything for someone smaller than a rabbit. It also lacked most of its roof. There was enough of a roof on the large side to be used for a temporary shelter, but that's where its usefulness ended. The dividing wall had caved in sections. All the machinery and vanity it must have had were either missing or destroyed, and none of the doors were intact. It was thankfully devoid of skeletons and any other signs of death. It did have an odor to it, a bad one. From the look of it, certain areas, especially the smaller side, had been used by mammals of various species as a place to relieve themselves. None of it looked fresh enough to cause worry, but it didn't help the smell one bit. It was too dark to try to find some place more suitable, and there were no other buildings around us. So I searched for the least filthy spot available. Keep your sensors open. I'm gonna try to find a safe-ish place to set up for the night.
Yes, miss.
Even though I apologized to him, I don't think he took me yelling at him again very well. He may just be a sphere of electronics, but somewhere along the line, I think he developed some sort of sense of emotion. At least in regards to myself. If anyone said that robots are unable to feel real emotion, then they never met Onion. Once I was more rested and my mind a bit clearer, I'll make sure to give him a sincere apology. If it weren't for him, I never would have made it this far. I just hope he hasn't developed an ego to go with his emotions. Against one wall there was a very large vending machine. It was empty, of course, the front glass shattered and all its treasures seized by some unknown survivor. The roof above it was relatively intact, and the smell of excrement was reduced. So I figured that this would be a good spot to camp. I no longer had any type of towel to place on the ground, and there didn't seem to be anything soft enough to use as a makeshift bed. So I just simply cleared off the floor as best I could. I set my bag down and took off my trench coat. I went to set it near my bag before I decided to lay it flat on the ground and use it as a barrier between myself and the floor. I took off my utility belt and bundled it up near my bag, while I took out my gun and placed it near me, just in case I would need it. I then opened up my bag and pulled out the first bit of food I saw. It was the Hungry Maw canned carrots. I took a look at the can. It was in pretty good condition, albeit that the label was a bit worn. There was no obvious way to open it, so I reached for my belt and pulled out my multi-tool. The pip-bore may seem to do just about everything, but it doesn't hold a candle against the magic of a can opener. I managed to get most of the lid undone, but there was a tiny bit that just wouldn't release. I grabbed hold of it and started to twist, but only managed to cut my paw, again, causing me to drop my multi-tool. I was just about to blurt out an expletive when a noise caught my attention. I took a look where the tool had landed and saw that it was next to the wall closest to the vending machine. I tore off the lid and threw it aside as I moved towards the machine. This Hungry Maw stuff was not what I expected. I figured it to be dried or preserved carrots, but instead it was a thick carrot-flavored orange paste. I dipped a finger from my non-bloody paw into the can and took a taste. It didn't taste like carrots. Honestly, it barely had a taste. But it was nourishment, so I continued to eat it as I grabbed my tool with the other paw. I tapped the floor with the tool and it sounded rather solid. I tapped a few other places on the floor with the same effect. I moved to the wall and started to tap. Solid, solid, solid. Bingo. Tapping on the wall right beside the machine produced a different noise. There was a hollow space behind this vending machine. I quickly finished my food and threw the can behind me as I stood up against the machine. Being that it was on the larger mammal side, this machine towered above me. It was also rather sturdy. I put my shoulder to it and tried to push it aside with no luck. Then I tried to tip it over, but found it still wouldn't budge. Upon further inspection, I realized it was bolted to the wall. I saw brackets on the floor as well, but all of these were missing their bolts. I also saw some scrape marks that led from the feet in an arc, but they were rather faded. But it proved that this had been moved at some point in the past. But how? It might be getting late, and I really should get some sleep. But this newfound mystery was just what I needed to get my mind off of things. There was some sort of room behind this, and I needed to find out. There could be an elephant's weight in treasure, or a stockpile of weapons and ammunition, or even a smorgasbord of food. I looked over the machine for some kind of secret switch or button, but I had no luck in finding either. Onion?
Yes, miss.
Look, I'm sorry for snapping at you again. It's just, things are a lot worse off out here than I could have ever imagined. And I think my brain is still trying to make sense of this. It's impacting my mood in various ways. And since 90% of the time it's just you and me, I don't stop and think before I talk to you. I am truly sorry for that.
It's all right, miss. Just like you, I tend to respond to my programming before anything else. It tells me to keep you safe. But I don't stop to analyze the reactionary results with the current predicament to see if it is the correct course of action. I will try harder, miss. Although,
It would be nice if there was someone other than myself to take the brunt of your emotions from time to time. One of these days you will cause me to short-circuit, miss.
I'll be sure to keep that in mind. Foolhardy adventure seeks companion to berate, yell, and cry at. Now, if you would be so kind to help me, I think this machine moves, but I can't figure out how.
Moves, miss?
There's a hollow space behind it, and from the looks of the floor it's been opened before. And I can't sleep until I know what's behind here.
Did you try to hit it, miss? That always seems to be your initial way of fixing something. Maybe you will accidentally hit some sort of hidden button.
Oh, hardy har har, Onion. I don't always hit things. And if it did have a button... Wait, a button! I remembered the second Jack Savage novel, where he was hunting down a terrorist organization that had hidden itself in the basement of a coffee shop. Turns out that one of the vending machine key panels was also the access panel when a certain code was used. I wonder if this was the same thing. I moved to the front of the machine, but saw the keypad was just out of reach. I looked around for something to boost my height. This place was picked clean of anything useful.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, miss, but if there's some kind of hidden button or key combination, I doubt it would work.
Why not?
There's no working power connected to this machine, miss.
Fuck. I didn't even think about checking that. Even if I knew the passcode, without power it would render it useless. And since it's not opened, it must require power to disengage the locking mechanism. If it didn't have power, I doubt there was any around here. And even if there was, it's not like I could move the machine. Wait, we do have power. Onion, I need you to float up to that keypad and give it a good jolt with your shocker.
What will that accomplish, miss?
I have no idea, but we're not making any headway. It's better than nothing. Plus, I'm too tired to come up with anything better. He turned towards the machine and slowly floated up towards the keypad. Once he was facing it, the slot holding his stun baton opened and he extended it until it touched the dead center of the pad. He ramped up the power and I saw a bright blue jolt of electricity shoot from the baton into the machine. There was some audible popping and hissing noises as it started to fry the circuits. The lights in and around the machine started to flicker as they got sporadic power. But then I heard a loud clicking noise as the vending machine started to move a few inches away from the wall. Bingo. I waited until Onion disabled his baton before grabbing the small gap that had formed and pulling with all my might. Since it was apparent that it had not been opened in a very long time, the hinges were not very loose. But I put all my effort into it until there was enough room for me to squeeze in. Stay out here, Onion. If you pick up anything on your scanners, alert me immediately.
Yes, miss. And do be careful.
I gave Onion a genuine smile before ducking into the hidden room. There were no lights, so I turned on my Pip-Board to full brightness. It was not a huge room, at least for someone the size of an elephant, but for me it was rather comfortable. I'm guessing it must have once been a closet of sorts. But why the secrecy by hiding it behind a vending machine? There was an oddity about this room. Despite it seeming to be built for much larger mammals, everything here was much closer to my size. There was a desk, a chair, and a computer that were all designed for an occupant much closer to my size. I looked around some more, shining my Pip-Board's light on the walls. They were covered in posters of various sizes, but they all had one thing in common. Space. There were a few recruitment posters that said Zootopia Space Agency, join today. Others showing pictures of mammals dressed in bulky white outfits. Astronauts, I'm guessing. Whoever this room belonged to really liked space. A small gust of wind came through the open door as I heard a small jingle above me. I pointed my light up to the ceiling and saw small, crudely colored spheres of various sizes hanging by string. They looked familiar. My mother had always tried to teach me the facts about outer space, but I tended to ignore them, thinking that I would never get to see it trapped in the Burrow. I think this was a very crude representation of our solar system. Why keep all this a secret? I went over to the desk and tried to access the computer, before realizing that since there was no power to open the door, there wouldn't be any power to operate this. I did, however, see a small data chip sitting on the desk on top of a bunch of papers. I picked up the chip and placed it in my Pip-Boar, getting ready to play it. But I got distracted by one of the papers. Based upon the date, it was well before the war. There was a picture of 6 mammals in a line, all wearing blue jumpsuits with ZSA across the chest. Above the picture reads, ZSA welcomes their newest recruits, including Charla Herdington, the first sheep astronaut and the latest part of the mayor's Mammal Inclusion Initiative. There were more papers, all of them commenting about the Mammal Inclusion Initiative. And every one of them featured the same name, Charla Herdington. Well, this must have been hers. Either that or some creepy stalker. Everything seemed to be giving this Charla a positive spin, making her out as some kind of hero. That is, until I saw the last few articles. One of them read, Charla Herdington, hero or coward. While some of the Mammal Inclusion Initiative additions, such as Officer Judy Hopps, have shown merit to the former mayor's plans, others have not worked out as well. While boarding the launch of the ZSA's newest space shuttle, astronaut Herdington refused to enter the shuttle, resulting in a substantial loss of nearly $400 million. $400 million? Just to launch a rocket? No wonder the world fell apart. The articles just got worse from there. It seems that Charla Herdington bailed out on 2 more flights after that, causing the ZSA to fire her. The papers berated her actions, saying that it was expected for a sheep to turn tail and run, and that the Mammal Inclusion Initiative may have had a few successes, but in cases like Herdington's, it showed that not every mammal can break out of their natural instincts. One paper even called her out as being a representative of cowardice among sheep. I thought Zootopia was supposed to be some sort of harmonious city. How can people tear apart their own kind like this? I had to stop myself from reading more. How can the same people who called her a hero to her species turn so abruptly and call her a coward? There had to be some sort of explanation for this. She's probably long dead, but I felt sympathy for her. She tried, and for some that's more than most can accomplish. I took all the negative articles and crumbled them. I want the next person to find this place and see only the good. I tried to toss the bailed up papers out the doorway, but I missed and it ricocheted and hit the desk. I heard a metallic thud hit the ground and saw something roll from underneath the desk into the corner behind the large filing cabinet. I went to see what it was, but what I found made me lose my balance and my ass hit the floor beneath me. It was a skeleton. It was roughly my size, but I could tell that it was not the same species. It had cloven hooves and was wearing a tattered jumpsuit. There was a small badge on the suit with the letters ZTA, and underneath it was the name, Charla Herdington. This was her room. She must have gotten a job here at the Zootopia Transit Authority after leaving the ZSA. That poor thing. Did she surround herself with her passion and her failure just to torment herself? I shone my light over the space to see if there was anything else, when I saw something shiny in gold. I reached to pick it up, taking care not to disturb the skeleton. It was a coin, or rather, one of the treasures of Zootopia. On the front was a picture of a female sheep, while on the back it said bravery. I think that it was her it was based upon. There was no dates on the coin, so I couldn't tell if it was made before or after the events of her downfall. But it didn't matter. I didn't know her, but even though she failed to face her fears, she still tried. And that's what bravery is. Trying.
Miss, my sensors are picking up something.
Fuck. So much for sleeping. I picked up the coin and put it in a pocket. I'll get back the other 2 from North, and I will make sure that they all have a home. Together. I want to honor those who the coins represent, and maybe in turn they can help me become better myself. If I live that long. I rushed out into the main room and didn't even have to open my Pip-Boy to tell where the trouble was coming from. Outside, on street level, noises of a struggle were occurring. I ran over to the doorless entry that faced closest to the ruckus and carefully peeked out. While it had gotten very dark, small bursts of light from a gun started to paint a picture. It was the 3 bears from earlier, but who were they fighting? Obviously not themselves, because they were shooting wildly up into the air. A small burst of air hit me as I saw a shadowy figure fly past the open door. It was definitely not one of those nasty insects. It was way too big, and way too fast. I followed the shadow as best I could as it circled in the sky. The bears were firing blindly in the air, attempting to hit whatever it was. Then another shadow joined, and another. It was 3 against 3, and these creatures had air superiority. I finally pulled out my Pip-Boy's map and started to track them. I saw the 3 dots circling, but the dots that should have represented the bears were flashing in and out like before. Why was I having trouble picking them up? I saw one of the circling dots break from the formation, and I popped my head back out just in time to see the shadow swoop down and grab one of the bears. The bear had to be at least double the creature's size and nearly triple its weight. But that didn't stop the flyer from picking up the bear with ease and flying off. The bears were still shooting mindlessly, as if they were not sure what to attack. As the creature flew over the station, I continued to track it with my Pip-Boy. It started to circle back as I heard a strange noise. A second later, the bear came crashing through the roof into the station, landing almost 20 feet from me. I was stunned. What the fuck were these things? Then the shadow flew down and landed on the bear. I risked aiming my Pip-Boy light at it. It was a monstrosity. It looked like a giant bat, but it had the claws of a wolf. It also had a long, scaly tail that had wrapped around the bear's neck. It took one look at me when the light hit it, and I heard a chirping, clicking noise coming from it. It turned back to the bear, and the creature took its clawed feet and started to tear at the bear's chest. I had to do something. I reached for my gun. Fuck. My belt, bag, and gun were on the other side of the room. It already knew that I was there, but the massive bear seemed to be a bigger priority than the tiny rabbit. I'm sure that would change soon enough. I turned off my light and started to sneak around, keeping as much distance as I could between me and it. If I made any sudden moves, I would be next on the menu. I was about halfway to my stuff when I heard a loud crunching noise that caused me to stop. The creature had ceased clawing at the bear and had thrust one of its feet into the bear's body and pulled something out. And at that moment, the bear stopped trying to fight and went limp. That's when I heard more whooshing and saw 2 more creatures land next to it. Each of them were holding some bloody mass in a clawed foot. The first one that had flown into the room jumped into the air and landed a few inches from me. And that was it. I was about to die. Then it let out a high-pitched noise.
Miss, run! I'll keep them distracted.
Onion had snuck up behind the creature and gave it a shock. I snapped out of it and darted the rest of the way over to my stuff. I grabbed my gun, bag, and belt. I didn't have time to put on my belt, so I flung it over one shoulder and the bag over the other, cocked the gun and fired at the first one that was now trying to swipe at Onion. My shot ripped a hole through one of its wings, and that caused it to stop. It placed a claw from the other winged arm through the hole, and I could have sworn I heard it laughing, as the hole sewed itself back up. Wait, fuck, it can regenerate? Who would ever heard of regenerating mammals? Onion, we've got to go, now! With my gun in hand, I dashed past them and ran through the back entrance onto the tracks. For all I knew, there were more of them down there, and while this probably was a huge mistake, at least from up here, I can see them better. I chanced to look behind me to see that Onion was not too far from me. And then the roof exploded as all 3 of them flew up from the station and started to pursue us. I think I just made them angry. I focused my attention ahead of me and kept running. I don't know how far behind me they were, or how fast they could go, but I didn't want to risk stopping to find out. I pushed my legs to their max again. I was already starting to feel tired. I didn't know where I was heading, but hopefully someplace a lot safer. The air moved ahead of me as I saw one of them fly past and circle back towards me. It was flying straight at me. It arched its back and pointed its clawed feet at me, both now free of anything and fully extended. But just before it hit me, I dropped to the ground, causing it to graze right above me. I jumped back up and kept running. Ahead I saw what looked like a giant brick wall that the tracks were about to go over. I kept my legs going at full speed as I dodged another attack. This time I almost fell off, but I needed to get over that wall. There might be some place to hide, or at least give me some better protection. These creatures seem way too fast and able to regenerate for me to fight alone. And even if I could get a message to the Guardians, it would be too late by the time they got here. Why the hell hasn't Bats activated? After the third near miss, I slapped the side of my Pip-Boar.
Imminent threat detected. Activate Bats.
It's about damn time! Yes! I felt the usual sting as the chemicals entered my body. The feeling that time was slowing down kicked in as I stopped and turned towards the nearest winged menace. I checked my Pip-Boar, but the highest chance to hit was a measly 36%. And even in my enhanced state, these things were zipping all over. I tried to fire a few shots, but they all missed. It was like that they had bats of their own. What the fuck can I do now? And then I remembered the grenades. I had only used a couple of them during the theater incident, so I had a couple left. Bats was wearing off, so I started to run again. I tried to dig out the grenades as I was moving. I almost dropped my bag once, and almost tumbled over on the second time. I couldn't just stop, or else I'd be shredded to death. I need to make it to the wall. The wall was getting closer, and I heard the occasional zapping noise behind me as Onion attempted to stun them. I think it was only making them madder. Thankfully, it was keeping their attention off me for long enough for Bats to cool down. I really hate using Onion for bait, but he is really good at it. Bats cooled down just as I reached the edge of the wall. It was nearly twice my height. But I have survived worse falls. I activated Bats again, and used the time to successfully grab a grenade from my bag. I held down the button as I waited for Bats to wear off. I didn't need it for what I was about to do. Onion, get over here! As soon as he heard me call, he stopped being bait and rushed over to me. Bats had finally worn off and everything was happening in real time. I saw all three creatures swooping towards me, getting into their attack position. I released the button and dropped it at my feet as I jumped backwards to the ground. I landed with a thud just as the grenade went off. Chunks of brick, wood, and metal flew everywhere as a large cloud of debris formed. I quickly gathered up my stuff and started to move. I highly doubt it would kill them, but hopefully it bought us a few moments of safety. This was definitely a district for rodents. My ears stood above most of the buildings and everything was scaled down. Tiny abandoned cars scattered on the streets. Small little light posts that snapped off when I touched them too hard. And even the buildings didn't seem very stable. I accidentally ran into one of them and it fell over with ease. And then I heard that all too familiar whooshing noise above my head. They found me. One of them tried to swoop down on me, but I kicked the building, causing it to nearly topple onto it. That provided me with a slight breather as it circled back around. This area was not going to be as safe as I thought. My luck, one of these buildings would topple over onto me and crush me. It probably beats getting eaten alive. The street started to widen as it came to an intersection. In the middle was a small, squat building, and lying next to it was a very large round object. Written on it was the Big Donut. It was relatively intact, so I picked it up just as two of them swooped at me. I spun around and tossed it as hard as I could at them. One of the creatures dodged out of the way and missed being struck, but the other one wasn't so fast. It hit it square in the chest, causing it to fall to the ground. One down, two to go. I tried to find something else around me. Maybe there was another giant donut I could use. I sighed. I don't think so. The other two were just sitting there, next to their downed companion. Maybe they've heard of my adventures against the impossible and were about to run. That thought was shaken from my head just as soon as it had formed when I saw the downed one slowly get up. Back to 3 against 1. Ah, fuck me. The one that I had hit with a large donut picked it up in its feet and flew up into the air, and started to fly in circles. It was dark. Maybe I had hit its head instead. Then it released the donut and came flying straight towards me. It came at me so quickly that I was barely able to duck out of the way. As it flew over my head, I felt the rush of wind. That creature was strong. I'm glad I didn't let it hit me. Although I have a feeling that its endurance was much greater than mine. I better not let it get into melee range. Or maybe I should. On top of a squat building behind me, I noticed 4 metal spikes sticking out of a roof. They were not huge, but if I could manage to loosen one, I could attempt to impale one of the creatures as it flew towards me. They moved fast enough that if I aimed correctly, its own momentum would substitute for my lack of strength and kill it. Thankfully, I had bats to give me accuracy. I jumped onto the building and tried to force the spike out of the concrete roof. Oh, it was in there good. This plan may not work as well as I'd imagined. I looked to where the creatures were, but they were gone. Did they give up and leave? I turned my Pip-Boar's light to maximum and shone it all over. And then I heard a loud gunshot. Where did that come from? They better not be attacking me. I have enough problems as it is. Then a second shot rang out. Then I realized it wasn't me they were aiming for. I heard a loud squeal as one of the creatures fell from the sky and crashed to the ground. I shone my light down on it and saw that it was bleeding from the chest. I knew that if that didn't kill it, it wasn't going to be out of commission for long. I heard a swooping noise as I saw the 2 other creatures dart off towards where I assumed the shot had come from. I drew my gun to finish off the downed creature, when the ground started to shake violently. It was another fucking earthquake. Really? This quake was much stronger than the one before. I saw the buildings near me start to shake, and a couple of them collapsed. These quakes couldn't be a common occurrence, or else there would be no buildings left standing here. I heard a cracking noise as I saw the ground around the building start to fracture. I tried to get up, but one of my feet went through the roof. I was stuck. Onion, my foot is stuck. Onion rushed over to me and tried to grab my foot with his grasping claw, but to no avail. It was not designed for this. I tried to loosen my foot again, as more cracks formed on the roof. The cracks widened the hole just enough for me to let my foot free, but not before getting struck with a much larger tremor that caused the entire roof to collapse underneath me. I fell into the building, which wasn't much of a drop considering. I started to get up when the floor beneath me collapsed again, and this time the fall was much, much longer. I hit the ground with a painful thud. I don't think I broke anything. I slowly got up. I was very sore, but I could move. Thankfully, Onion was able to follow me down as I looked up and saw the building falling into the hole above. I jumped back to avoid the debris crashing down. Once the quake subsided and the dust cleared, I turned on my light and went to investigate where I had landed. Looks like we're not going out that way, Onion.
How about this way, miss?
I looked back towards where he was and saw a small entrance. It was way too small to walk through, but there was enough room for me to crawl. I knelt down and shone my light in the darkness. It was a tunnel, and it looked like it went for a short distance. Well, it looks like it's the only way forward from here. Time to go spelunking.